For those of you who have read the Narnia Chronicles, what is the most famous line in all the books? Are you thinking of one? So if you are thinking of the line, "He's not a tame lion," then you've got it right. That is probably the most famous line in all of the books, and it's also a very helpful one for us to think about Jesus. Remember, back on Monday, we talked about how Lewis doesn't tell us about Jesus. He shows us what Aslan is like, and then lets us make the connection. And the most important thing that he shows us is that the true Jesus, who he truly should at the same time fill us with a mysterious sense of awe and attraction and beauty, and yet also a mysterious sense of fear about him. He's the desire of our hearts, and yet he's also scary. The disciples saw this in Matthew 4:35-41, when Jesus calmed the storm. Both of those things can coexist, even though our reason and our imaginations can't really understand them fully. And the line, "He's not a tame lion," really captures that well. It all starts in the beginning of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, when the Pevensey children are sitting down for a meal with the beavers. So they're sitting in the beavers' little house, and they're eating fish and chips and a marmalade roll for dessert. And then they start to ask Mr. Beaver about Aslan. And so Mr. Beaver tells them that Aslan is a lion. And then this conversation happens. Whoops. I need to turn page. "Ooh," said Susan. "I thought he was a man. Is he quite safe? I'd feel rather nervous about meeting a lion." "That you will, dearie, make no mistake," said Mrs. Beaver. "If there's anyone who can appear before Aslan without their knees knocking, they're either braver than most or just plain silly." "Then he isn't safe," said Lucy. "Safe?" said Mr. Beaver. "Don't you hear what Mrs. Beaver tells you? Who said anything about safe? Course he isn't safe. But he's good. He's the king, I tell you." "I'm longing to see him," said Peter, "even if I do feel frightened when it comes to the point." Peter has that mysterious longing and fear, yet at the same time. And then at the very end of the book, when after all of the story is said and done, and Lucy and Mr. Beaver are talking about Aslan as Aslan leaves, Mr. Beaver says, "He's wild, you know, not like a tame lion." You see, Lewis was worried about a trend that he saw in his day of lowering the majesty, the beauty, the holiness, the amazingness of Jesus himself. And it's one that we still see in our day today, as Lewis did, maybe even worse than what Lewis saw. So on the one side, there is the well-meaning preacher who tries to make Jesus more accessible through very lowly and very kind of ordinary analogies, like Jesus is your friend. And today, when we see that kind of thing, it's all too easily misunderstood as, well, Jesus is like my friends, which means he's always friendly, under my control, and safe. Yet Jesus is not just our friend. He is that. But he is also our Lord, which means he controls our lives and this world, not the other way around. He's also the King of the universe, which means he is running the universe and he's running our lives, doing what is good and best, but not always what we may like. He isn't safe, but he's good. Then on the other side, there's the modern idea that we can reduce everything that Jesus is down to a doctrinal formula. Now, we have creeds and we have theologies like the Westminster Confession of Faith and the Westminster Shorter Catechism. Those are good. They're helpful. But it's tempting when we look at those to think that if we know the theology, then we just have Jesus all figured out. We know who he is. And yes, Jesus has shown us who he is in the Bible. But you see, he's also God, which means we cannot understand him fully. We never will be able to understand him fully. Yes, he has attributes that we can depend on. As the Westminster Confession or Shorter Catechism says, he is infinite, eternal, unchangeable in his being, justice, holiness, or I've got it backwards, being, wisdom, power, holiness, justice, goodness, and truth. But that does not mean that we can understand him. That does not mean he is fully comprehensible to our reason or even our imagination. We can't manage him. He will overwhelm us when we truly understand who he is. You see, you may be the world's leading expert in lions, for example, but you still cannot fully predict or fully comprehend a wild lion. You can't. Jesus is wild. He's not like a tame lion. Now, all of that can be scary when we really think about it. Jesus will always do what he has promised. Yes. He will never change. Yes. But he is also not under our control, and he does what is best for us and for the church, not what we want, what is safe, or what is comfortable. What is best for you, what is best for the church, might not at all be what we planned, and it might even be very painful. It might. But he is good. Think about the disciples, for example. All of the disciples but John were martyred, which means they were killed for their faith. That was good for them because Jesus used them to spread the gospel, which brought them joy and eventually ended up in eternity in heaven with him. That's good, but it isn't safe. He wasn't safe for them. One of my friends, who's also a pastor, lost his wife to cancer a few years back. And when she was first diagnosed with the cancer, he was really scared. And she was the love of his life. They had 4 kids who were all very young at the time. He had no idea what he would do if he lost her to cancer. And when they were sitting in the doctor's office, she said to him, Chris, and now this isn't our pastor Chris, by the way, a different Chris. Chris, it will be okay. We may not know what okay will look like, but he's good. It will be okay. And when Chris was preaching the eulogy at her funeral about a year later, he told us that story. And that's knowing that Jesus is good, but he isn't safe. He always does what is good. But he can't be controlled by us. He doesn't do what we want. He does what is best. And that kind of God can be scary at times, even though we can trust him, because you don't know what okay will look like. You can't control him through your good deeds, your prayers, or anything else. He isn't safe, but he's good. He's wild, not like a tame lion. You think about that.